Hi everyone. We're back with our discussion of Chapter 7 of Picking Cotton. So we left off where he meets Bobby Poole in prison. He's like, I think this is the guy who actually did the crimes I'm in here for. So we learn on page 101 that he works the kitchen shift from 4 a.m. to 2 p.m. He explains that the money he makes from that job goes into a fund, and you can take out up to $30 from that fund in cash. But if you're ever caught by a guard with more than $30 on you, they will take the money. That's how that unfortunately works. There were some advantages to working in the kitchen. He said that kitchen workers could eat dinner earlier. Um, he was just trying to fit in. He ate alone most of the time. He said we had milk with every meal. Ugh, even at an elementary school, I didn't even like that. The tables and chairs were all connected to the floor so they couldn't be used if there was a fight or anything like that. And then remember in the kitchen there was a guy named New York who was kind of after him. And so New York finally goes after him again. Ron stands up to him. The guards break it up and New York actually leaves him alone. But then we find out there's another guy, Kennedy, who's kind of after him. And on page 103 it says Kennedy did karate and was cut from years of lifting. He'd already done 5 years, and like a lot of guys, pumping all that weight had pumped up his head. He was serving time for kidnapping and rape. Um, and at one point, Kennedy and a friend of his confronted Ron in the shower, which could have been a very dangerous situation, but Ron stood up to him and Kennedy backed down. And one of the things that the prisoners say to themselves, this is on the bottom of page 104, keep your mind off the street and your hands off the meat. And Ron says, to some people, it meant trying to use the time you were doing to get better, to educate yourself. So if you did get back out on the street, you wouldn't do something stupid to wind up back in the penitentiary. Other people, myself included, thought it also had something to do with letting life on the outside go. You couldn't keep thinking about everything you were missing in your old life. Things on the outside moved on without you. So at this point, he's just learning to protect himself, but he's also keeping that eye on Bobby. Then he meets a man by the name of Roger Blackstock. He was a smart guy. He became very knowledgeable about the law and worked on his own case himself. In fact, he looked over other inmates' briefs for them. He ran sort of an underground legal clinic that Kennedy was a part of, too. And Ron trusted him. And Roger comes to him and says, well, look out, because Kenny's talking about you. So here, Ron is really having to think about surviving. He says, if word spread that Kenny broke me, I'd be a goner. The beginning of your time was very important. The battles you won and lost had everything to do with where you were going to fit in. So finally, Kenny confronts him. They kind of have a fight. The COs come in and break it off. Ron tells a steward that Kenny has been bothering him ever since he got there. He was just defending himself. But remember, if this happens, you can get locked up. And so we find out that the steward actually came to Ron's rescue and spoke for him. And so Kenny was the one who ended up getting locked up. And then on page 108, we see a letter from Ron to his attorney saying, hey, I've been in here for a year. Where's everything with my appeal? What's going on? And then Bobby Poole gets moved in to work in the kitchen with Ron. And guess what happens? Nobody can tell them apart, apparently. Everybody has a hard time with that. And so he's remembering that. He's like, okay, I need to talk to my lawyers about this. And so on page 109, we find out that his lawyers are trying to get him an appeal, a new trial, by saying that the judge should have included the fact that Mary Reynolds did not recognize him in the lineup. And then Kenny comes to him one day. He's like, what is this about? Well, Kenny was working on Bobby Poole's case. And Kenny goes, Bobby admitted that he did the crimes that you're in here for. And at the time, Ron was like, I don't trust Kenny. I don't know what this is about. But again, he's keeping an eye on everything. In the meantime, he says, you never let your family see how low you are. And so one day he's visiting with his sister. The same day Bobby is there, visiting with someone. And at the end, as family leaves and they're going back to their cells, Bobby tells Ron that he's interested in talking with his sister. Well, Ron didn't want anything like that, but he's like, hey, I've got an idea. He's like, well, I don't really trust, she doesn't really talk to people who she doesn't know, but maybe if we take a picture together, she might talk to you. So one day when the JCs came around to take pictures, they took a picture of each other, and he doesn't send it to his sister, he sends it to his lawyer. And so that is included in our book here. If you go through, it's this little one right here. That is the picture, the Polaroid they took. Now to me, they look different, but I'm going to show you guys for chapter 8 a video in which they're better pictures of both of them side by side, and they look a little bit more similar. And so, yeah, so Ron's he's a little genius. He's like, okay, let's take a picture, and I'm sending that to my lawyer. In the meantime, his mom unfortunately has a stroke, and that builds a lot of anger up in Ron. On page 112, he says, his sister Diane asked me to pray for her, but instead I allowed the anger and the frustration to grow. The cops had set me up, I thought, because I had dated white women. I had never raped anybody. I was furious at the woman who said I raped her, at the DA, the judge, the cops, who were keeping me from my family when they needed me. I was sure they were all home with their families, and they didn't give a damn about another black man rotting in prison. It didn't even matter to them if they had the right one. And so he's got now a lot of anger building up in him. And then Bobby gets moved into his dorm. So he's just feet away from where Ron is at. And he's like, I can't take this anymore. I'm going to take justice into my own hands. And he makes a makeshift knife, something to hurt him with, to kill him. His dad ends up coming for a visit. And we learn a little bit about his dad, that his dad had a drinking problem. He had had an accident in the truck with the kids. And so after that, he kind of changed his ways a little bit. And this is the advice that his dad gave him. He said, Ron, you told me you were innocent of this crime, and I believed you. But if you take this man's life, you ain't never coming home. You'll belong here. And so Ron admits that he's tired. He ends up writing a letter to his mom about it all, but he never sends it. Abraham Lincoln did the exact same thing, where his General Grant was the guy who had to win the war, and he was really having a hard time with him. But he knew he couldn't just send him a letter yelling at him and being mean to him. He had to be positive. And so after Lincoln died, they found all these letters he had written to Grant, but they were never sent because it was just Lincoln getting his frustration out. And so that's what Ron's doing here. He's getting that frustration out, and then he decides to change his mind. And hopefully we see in the next chapter that that is a good thing. All right, so I don't have any videos or anything like that for chapter 6 or 7. I'll have a couple of videos for you to watch for chapter 8. Okay, so hopefully you're finding this interesting. Hopefully it's not a hard, difficult read to understand, but hopefully you're kind of getting an idea of what can happen when we are not correct in how we testify and how we say, yes, this is the person that did this crime, why it's so important that juries are given the right information, but they really take the time to consider what's really going on. All right, so we'll have more to discuss in chapter 8.